I'm standing in a place that isn't a place exactly. It's like being inside a memory, but it's also a feeling, and it's happening now. The dominant colors are this impossibly deep emerald, like moss that's never seen sunlight, and a shimmering gold, not like metal, but like captured starlight. It's everywhere, bleeding into each other, making the air itself seem thick and luminous. And the light? Oh, the light. It doesn't radiate from a source. It's just there. It feels like warm honey, slow and viscous, seeping into every part of me. There's a music, too. It's so intricate, so delicate, like a tiny music box playing a melody that's both familiar and utterly new. It's not loud, not intrusive, but it's woven into the fabric of everything. It's like the sound of creation humming. My body feels absent, or rather, the memory of my body feels absent. There's no weight, no ache, no familiar tension. Instead, there's this gentle warmth that spreads through my bones, a deep, pervasive comfort that I've never known. It's like coming home to a place I never realized I'd left. Everything that felt heavy, everything that was sharp or demanding in my life, it's just gone, dissipated into this shimmering green and gold. There's a sense of knowing, too, a profound understanding that washes over me. I understand things I never thought I could. It's not like reading words or hearing explanations. It's more like the knowledge is blooming inside me, like a flower unfurling its petals. And the peace, it's overwhelming. Not a passive, empty peace, but a vibrant, alive peace. It's the peace of knowing everything is exactly as it should be, and that includes me. It's like the universe exhales, and I exhale with it. It's so utterly beautiful, so profoundly real, that words just, they fail. I don't know how to describe it. The light, the colors, the music, they're not things I can point to and say, this is like that. It was more like color as a feeling, sound as a texture, existence as pure, unadulterated presence. And then I was back. It was like being slammed against a brick wall. And then I was in the hospital. My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm 62 years old, and until recently, my life revolved around sign painting. Not the kind you see on trucks, but the old-school, hand-lettered kind. Gold leaf on glass, intricate scrollwork, the kind of thing that takes an eternity and commands respect. I'm a perfectionist, you see. Everything had to be just so. Every line, every curve had to be flawless. My hands were my life, really. And my faith, well, I was a devout believer. I believed in the power of prayer and the goodness of God and the structure and order of things. But lately, as the years piled up, that faith had started to feel creaky, like an old door I kept opening. And it was making more noise than it used to. Doubts were starting to whisper at the edges of my mind, tiny cracks in the foundation. For years, my biggest worry, the one that gnawed at me like a persistent toothache, was my daughter, Sarah. She's an artist, a painter. And when I say artist, I mean she paints abstract, chaotic things, wild colors, textures I can't make sense of. Not like my work, which was precise and beautiful. I saw her choices, her life, as a series of perceived failures on my part. I'd done my best, I thought, but somewhere along the line, we'd drifted apart. She's estranged from me now, and that distance was a constant, dull ache in my chest. Just last week, I remember standing in my studio, the smell of turpentine sharp in the air, the late afternoon sun glinting off the perfect, unblemished surface of a piece I was working on. The clock on the wall ticked with that familiar, insistent rhythm. My morning ritual was always the same. Strong black coffee, a quick skim of the newspaper, and then straight to the studio. I'd always worry, even as I mixed my paints, about whether Sarah was okay. Was she eating enough? Was she happy? Did she understand that my constant anxiety was just a twisted way of showing love? It's funny, looking back. I'd spend hours agonizing over the tiny imperfections in a piece of lettering, but I couldn't see the perfection in the path my own daughter was forging for herself. I didn't believe in anything I couldn't touch, couldn't measure, couldn't perfect. And Sarah, she was the opposite of all that. Did you have any sense looking back that something was coming? There were little things. Nothing I would have ever called a premonition at the time. Just static in the air. A few days before, I was driving home from the supplier with a new batch of gold leaf, and for no reason at all, the radio cut out. Not just a flicker, but a dead silence. And I couldn't get it back on for the rest of the drive. I just chalked it up to a faulty radio. Then, the morning of, I remember looking out my kitchen window at the sky. It was Tuesday, October 17th, 2023. Overcast, a typical autumn day. But for a moment, just a fleeting second, the clouds seemed to part and there was this intense shaft of sunlight, impossibly bright, hitting my rose bush. It lasted only a second, and then the clouds closed back in. I thought, well, that's strange. But I was already thinking about the appointment. I was scheduled for a routine procedure in the oncology wing at St. Jude's Hospital. Nothing serious, or so I thought. Just a minor thing they needed to check. I was more worried about the paint I was in the middle of than anything else. I thought I was just tired, just the usual stress of work and, well, life. The procedure was supposed to be quick, in and out. I remember the sterile smell of the hospital, that faint, sharp scent of antiseptic that always made my nose wrinkle. The nurse, a young woman with kind eyes and a practiced calm, was adjusting a strap on my arm. The surgeon, a man whose face I'd only seen in a brief consultation, was standing nearby, reviewing something on a tablet. It was Tuesday afternoon, the sky outside still a dull, uniform gray. The room was cool, almost chilly, and the fluorescent lights hummed with a low, monotonous drone. I remember thinking about the intricate details of a particular font I'd been struggling with, wondering if I should add a subtle shadow to give it depth. And then, it happened. It wasn't a sudden pain, not at first. It was more like a vice. A cold, metallic taste flooded my mouth, and a tightening and unbearable pressure clamped around my chest like a fist. It stole my breath, my ability to think. I tried to say something, anything, but no sound came out. My vision narrowed, the hum of the lights receding, the faces of the surgeon and nurse blurring into indistinct shapes. And in that precise second, I knew. I was dying. The monitors began to shriek, a sound that sliced through the fading hum. And the last thing I felt, before everything went black, was a profound, disorienting stillness, a quiet that was absolute. My charts later told me I was clinically dead for 4 minutes and 15 seconds. And then I was somewhere else entirely. It wasn't a transition in the way you'd imagine, like walking through a door or falling through a hole. It was more like the world I was just in. It just dissolved, like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. One moment I was experiencing the violent, suffocating cessation of my body, and the next I was simply there. It's like trying to describe a color you've never seen or a sound that exists outside the range of human hearing. I was lifted, not physically, but as if the very essence of my being was gently buoyant, rising without effort. It was like the air itself had become a soft, yielding substance, cradling me. I remember the feeling of my physical form, or the memory of it, simply ceasing to be a burden. No weight, no aches, no tightness in my chest. It was like shedding an old, heavy coat that I hadn't realized I was wearing. It was such a relief, such a profound release from the physical. I think I tried to grasp at the experience, to categorize it, to compare it to something I knew, but it slipped through my mental fingers like mist. It wasn't a journey, not really. It was an instantaneous arrival. One moment, I was a body failing. The next, I was pure consciousness, existing in this new, indescribable space. The first thing I noticed wasn't something I saw, but something I felt. It was a profound absence of sensation that was paradoxically the most intense sensation of all. The absence of pain, yes, but also the absence of temperature, of pressure, of any physical limitation whatsoever. It was like every nerve ending I'd ever had simply gone silent. And then came the warmth. Not the heat of the sun or a fire, but a pervasive, gentle warmth that permeated through my entire being. It felt like being steeped in liquid sunshine, or like my very molecules were being soothed. It spread through me, bone deep, a comfort so absolute it brought tears to my eyes, if I had eyes to cry with. Then my senses began to awaken to this new reality. The dominant colors were this impossibly deep emerald, like the heart of a forest canopy where sunlight struggles to penetrate, and a shimmering gold, not the metallic gleam of jewelry, but a soft, incandescent glow like starlight captured and held. They weren't just colors, they were feelings. The emerald was deep peace, a sense of ancient wisdom. The gold was pure joy, an effervescent lightness. The light itself wasn't coming from anywhere specific. It was just present, like air is present. Does that make sense? It didn't cast shadows. It didn't illuminate objects in a conventional way. It was simply the medium in which everything existed. And the music. Oh, the music. It was a soft, intricate melody, like a forgotten music box playing in a distant, sun drenched room. It wasn't loud, but it was everywhere, woven into the very fabric of this place. It was a melody that soothed and uplifted, a sound that felt like the universe humming a lullaby. There was no wind, no breeze, yet I felt a gentle sensation, like a caress against my awareness, as if the very atmosphere was alive and breathing. I could feel presence. Not the presence of others in a physical sense, but a sense of profound awareness, of being observed not with judgment, but with pure, unadulterated understanding. It was like standing in the presence of something vast and loving, something that knew me completely. And then I recognized him. Or rather, I recognized his presence. It wasn't a visual recognition, not in the way I'd recognize a face. It was a deep, resonant knowing that vibrated through my entire being. It was the presence of my mother who died when I was just a girl. I felt her love, not as an abstract concept, but as a tangible force, a wave of unconditional acceptance that washed over me. There was no physical form, no body as I understood it, but I felt her essence, her warmth, her gentle spirit. I knew it was her from the way her presence felt, so familiar, so comforting, so utterly maternal. It was like the memory of her touch, the echo of her laughter, amplified 1,000-fold. I felt an overwhelming surge of emotion, a release of all the years of longing and unspoken words. The message came not as words, but as a direct infusion of knowing. It was like a download of understanding, bypassing my conscious mind and settling directly into my soul. It was about Sarah, my daughter. The message was clear, undeniable. Your daughter's choice to pursue art was her own path, and your constant worry was a misguided form of love. She knows you are proud, even if you never said the words. It landed with the force of revelation. All those years of agonizing, of judging, of trying to mold her into what I thought she should be, it was all based on my own fears, my own imperfections. I saw it then, with a clarity that was both painful and liberating. I had never truly seen her. I had seen my own anxieties projected onto her life. I understood that her art, her unconventional path, was her authentic expression, and my constant attempts to steer her, to protect her from what I perceived as failure, had been a disservice. I had been so focused on perfection, on control, that I had missed the vibrant, messy, beautiful unfolding of her true self. And the part that cracked me open, that made me weep with a joy I'd never known, was the knowing that she knew I was proud. Even when I never voiced it, even when my actions were clouded by my own insecurity, she felt my pride. It was the most profound absolution I could have ever received. I witnessed a moment from my childhood, a time when Sarah was maybe 7 or 8, and she'd painted a lopsided, incredibly vibrant picture of our house. I'd looked at it, and my first thought, before even saying thank you, was about how the chimney was crooked. I'd corrected her on it. And in that moment, being shown that memory from the outside, I saw the disappointment flicker across her small face, a disappointment I had so carelessly inflicted. And then I saw her later that day, looking at her painting again, her brow furrowed, but then a small smile as she began to add little sparkles of yellow to the sky, a detail I had completely overlooked. It wasn't about the crooked chimney. It was about her vision, her unique way of seeing the world. And then it was like a violent jolt. Not a gentle lifting this time, but a brutal, unwelcome pulling. It felt like being dragged backward through a narrow, abrasive tunnel. I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay in that place of peace, of knowing, of my mother's love. But some force was yanking me back. It was the thought of Sarah, the realization that I hadn't truly apologized, that I hadn't let her know, really know, that I understood and accepted her path. That was what made me accept the return. I had to go back. I had to try. The re-entry into my body was agonizing. It was like being forced into a mold that was too small, too cold, too loud. I gasped, a ragged, painful sound that felt alien to me. The first thing I saw was the blurry ceiling of the hospital room, the harsh glare of the fluorescent lights. The second thing I heard was the relentless, maddening beep of a heart monitor. And then the distinct sound of a nurse's voice, slightly muffled, arguing with someone about a misplaced lunch order. "Welcome back, Eleanor." The world felt too bright, too heavy, too painfully separate. The silence of that other place was gone, replaced by the cacophony of ordinary existence. I spent a few more days in the hospital, slowly regaining my strength. My daughter, Sarah, came to see me. It was the first time she'd visited me in years. The conversation was awkward at first, full of unspoken words and years of distance. But then, I told her about the painting, the one with the crooked chimney. I told her I finally understood. I saw her eyes well up, and she told me she'd always known I loved her, even when I didn't show it well. It was a start. The biggest change, the one that still surprises me, is my relationship with my work. I tried to paint again after I got out. I set up my easel, mixed my paints, laid out my gold leaf, but I couldn't. The meticulous precision, the striving for perfection, it felt suffocating. I ended up picking up a brush, not for a sign, but for myself. I started painting abstract pieces, wild and free. No intention to sell them, no need for them to be anything other than what they were. Vibrant colors, bold strokes, a complete abandonment of the rules I'd lived by for so long. It felt like a different kind of prayer, a more honest one. And the smell? Oh, the smell of antiseptic. I can no longer stand it. Even walking into a doctor's office now sends a shiver down my spine. The faintest trace of it, and I feel that metallic taste flood my mouth, that tightening in my chest. It's a constant, visceral reminder of that moment between worlds. I live differently now. My perfectionism has softened, or rather, it's been rechanneled. I still appreciate beauty, but I don't demand it to be flawless. I've learned to embrace the messiness, the imperfections, because that's where the real life is. Last Tuesday, my daughter called me from her studio, excited about a new technique she was trying. I sat with her on the phone for an hour, listening intently, not offering advice, just being present. I didn't check my watch once. That's new. Yesterday, I found myself standing in my old studio, the one with the turpentine smell. I picked up a piece of scrap wood, some old paints, and just started playing. No plan, no expectation. Just the joy of color on wood. The light filtering through the dusty window felt like honey. The light filtering through the dusty window felt like honey. I stood there for a long time, just letting the feeling wash over me. It wasn't the same as the honey light of the other place. Not exactly. This was earthier, more grounded, but it held a similar warmth. It was the warmth of sunlight on aging wood, of dust motes dancing in a beam. It was the warmth of creation, untainted by expectation or judgment. It was the purest kind of joy. I'd spent so many years striving for a perfection that was ultimately hollow. The perfect line, the perfect curve, the perfect shade of gold leaf. It was all about control, about imposing my will on the material, on the world. But in that other place, in that impossibly serene emerald and gold expanse, I'd glimpsed something different. I'd seen the beauty in imperfection, the inherent value in a path chosen freely, even if it was winding and unconventional. My mother's presence had been a reminder of unconditional love, and Sarah's art, once a source of my greatest anxiety, was now a symbol of her own unique, brilliant spirit. The message about her knowing my pride, even when I couldn't articulate it, had been a balm to my soul. It had healed wounds I hadn't even realized were so deep. The transformation wasn't a single event, but a series of quiet revelations. It was in the way I no longer flinched when I heard the squeak of a hospital door, even if the phantom scent of antiseptic still occasionally pricked at my senses. It was in the way I found myself listening more than speaking, truly hearing what Sarah had to say, not just waiting for my turn to offer unsolicited advice. It was in the way I looked at my old sign painting equipment. The pristine brushes, the jars of pigments, the meticulously organized tools, and felt not regret, but a gentle detachment. Those tools had served their purpose, had been a part of my journey, but they no longer defined me. My new canvases were a riot of color. I bought cheap canvases, the kind I would have once dismissed as unworthy of my attention. I didn't sketch, didn't plan. I just let the colors spill, blend, collide. I used palette knives, my fingers, anything to break free from the tyranny of the fine brush. Sometimes I'd add a touch of gold leaf, not in meticulous patterns, but in sweeping, untamed gestures, like a burst of sunlight erupting from the canvas. It was messy, it was chaotic, and it was utterly mine. It wasn't for anyone else, not for praise, not for profit. It was a conversation with myself, a way of expressing the inexpressible, of translating the echoes of that profound piece into something tangible, something I could hold. One afternoon, I was working on a particularly vibrant piece, a swirling vortex of blues and oranges. Sarah had stopped by, and she was watching me, her arms crossed, a soft smile playing on her lips. "It's loud, Mom," she said, her voice gentle. "I hope so," I replied, dabbing a brush into a pot of bright magenta. "It's supposed to be," she chuckled. "It is, but it's beautiful, really beautiful." It was the most direct compliment she'd given my art in years, and it landed differently than any praise ever had before. It wasn't about technique or precision or commercial viability. It was about the essence, the feeling. It was about connection. The estrangement from Sarah had been a heavy weight, a constant source of sorrow. I'd spent so much time dissecting my perceived failures as a mother, replaying every argument, every disappointment. I'd blamed myself for her choices, for her distance. But the message from the afterlife had shattered that narrative. It had shown me that Sarah was not a reflection of my success or failure as a parent, but a wholly independent being, charting her own course. My worry, my constant anxiety, had been a cage I'd tried to build around her, a cage built of my own fears. In trying to protect her from the world, I had inadvertently kept myself from truly knowing her. The days unfolded with a new rhythm. I still woke early, but the urgency had faded. The need to be productive, to achieve, had been replaced by a gentle unfolding. I found joy in the small things, the way the sunlight fell on my old wooden easel, the comforting weight of a mug of tea in my hands, the sound of Sarah's laughter on the phone. I spent more time outdoors, not with a specific purpose, but just to be present in the world. I'd sit on a park bench, watching the leaves rustle, feeling the sun on my face, and marvel at the sheer, unadulterated beauty of it all. It was a stark contrast to the sterile confines of the hospital oncology wing, a stark reminder of what I had almost lost and what I had unexpectedly gained. There were moments, of course, when the old anxieties would try to surface. A critical thought about a crooked line on a piece of paper, a fleeting worry about Sarah's financial stability. But now I had a new perspective. I could recognize those thoughts for what they were, echoes of an old way of being, and gently let them go. I wouldn't engage with them, wouldn't wrestle with them. I'd simply acknowledge them and return my attention to the present moment, to the vibrant, imperfect reality that surrounded me. It was like being able to see the strings on a puppet show and choosing not to pull them. I remembered how I used to dread Tuesdays. Tuesdays were for appointments, for routines, for the quiet hum of the hospital. Now Tuesdays were just days. Sometimes Sarah would call, or I'd go to the local art supply store, or I'd just spend the day painting. The weight of that particular day, so irrevocably tied to my brush with death, had been lifted. It was no longer a marker of something ending, but simply another opportunity to experience the richness of life. The physical remnants of my former life were slowly being shed. I had boxes of old sign painting supplies that I intended to give away. I didn't need them anymore. They represented a version of me that was no longer relevant, a sculptor of perfection who had learned the profound beauty of letting go. I looked at the gold leaf, the shimmering, precious material I had once treated with such reverence, and saw it now as just another color, another tool for expression, not an end in itself. My faith had also undergone a profound shift. The rigid structure of my former beliefs, with its emphasis on sin, punishment, and divine judgment, had crumbled. I still believed in a higher power, in a benevolent force that permeated the universe, but it was a more fluid, more encompassing belief. It was the belief that I had experienced in that other place, the sense of pure, unadulterated love and acceptance. It was the feeling of being held, of being known, of being part of something vast and interconnected. I no longer felt the need to pray for divine intervention, but rather to simply be in communion with that universal presence. It was a quiet, steady faith, like the slow, deep roots of an ancient tree. I found myself returning to my old studio less and less. It smelled too much of turpentine, of a life that had been too narrowly defined. My new studio was a brighter, more open space. I had cleared out a spare room in my house, painted the walls a soft, soothing cream, and filled it with plants and natural light. The music box melody from my afterlife experience was often playing softly in the background, a gentle reminder of the peace that was always accessible. The core message from my NDE about Sarah's path and my misguided love continued to resonate. It was a constant reminder to let go of my need to control, to accept, and to truly see the people in my life for who they are. It was a lesson I was still learning, but I was committed to it. One evening, Sarah invited me over for dinner. As we were clearing the dishes, she paused, holding a plate with a faint, colorful stain on it. "You know," she said, looking at the stain with a thoughtful expression, "this reminds me of that painting you're doing now. The messy one. I love it, Mom. It feels alive." A warmth spread through me, a familiar, comforting sensation. It wasn't the burning gold of starlight, but the gentle, steady glow of genuine connection. "Thank you, darling," I said, and for the first time in a long time, I meant it with every fiber of my being. There was no hesitation, no qualification, just pure, unadulterated gratitude. She smiled, a wide, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "You're welcome. It's good to see you painting again, really painting." I looked around my new studio, the vibrant canvases leaning against the walls, the scent of fresh paint and beeswax candles filling the air. The light filtering through the window was soft, warm, and full of promise. It wasn't the blinding light of revelation, but the gentle glow of a new dawn. I had come through the darkness, through the cold, metallic taste of death, and found myself in a place of unexpected beauty and profound peace. My perfectionism had not disappeared, but it had been transformed. It was no longer a rigid demand for flawlessness, but a quiet appreciation for the intricate, messy, and glorious tapestry of life. I was Eleanor Vance, 62 years old, a former sign painter, and a recovering perfectionist, and for the first time I felt truly, completely alive. The antiseptic smell still occasionally made me flinch, a phantom echo of my return, but it was fading, losing its power. The dominant colors in my life were no longer muted hospital grays, but the vibrant emerald of deep peace and the shimmering gold of pure, unadulterated joy. And in the gentle hum of the music box melody, I heard not a farewell, but a promise of continued growth, of evolving love, and of the endless, exquisite beauty of imperfection. And in the gentle hum of the music box melody, I heard not a farewell, but a promise of continued growth, of evolving love, and of the endless, exquisite beauty of imperfection. The sterile smell of antiseptic. Even now, months after my return, the faintest whiff of it can send a tremor through me. It's a visceral reminder of the razor's edge I walked, of that terrifying void where breath ceased and thought dissolved. I'd been in the oncology wing of St. Jude's Hospital, a place I'd once associated with hope and healing, but which now felt like a mausoleum of silenced dreams. It was a routine procedure, they'd said. A simple checkup. How ironic, how utterly tragically ironic, that it would be the gateway to a reality so far beyond anything I had ever conceived. My hands, once so steady, so precise, capable of crafting the most intricate of letters, now trembled at the mere thought of that metallic tang, that suffocating pressure. It was as if my body remembered the terror even as my mind struggled to reconcile it with the boundless peace I had experienced. I remember standing in my studio after my discharge, the familiar scent of turpentine and oil paints filling the air. It should have been a comfort, a return to the sanctuary of my craft. But it wasn't. The tools that had been my lifeblood now seemed alien, intimidating. The perfectly ground pigments, the meticulously cleaned brushes, the jars of shimmering gold leaf, they spoke of a dedication to perfection that I now understood was a form of blindness. I'd spent decades honing my skills, chasing an unattainable ideal, and in doing so, I had missed so much. I'd missed the vibrant chaos of Sarah's artistic journey, the unique beauty of her self-expression. I'd missed the subtle nuances of life, the imperfect yet profound connections that truly mattered. When Sarah visited me in the hospital, it was the first time in nearly 3 years. The silence between us had been a chasm, filled with unspoken accusations and regrets. I had expected judgment, perhaps even a final severing of ties. Instead, there was an awkward tenderness, a hesitant reaching out. I had confessed, falteringly, about the crooked chimney on her childhood drawing, admitting that my focus on its imperfection had blinded me to the joy she had poured into creating it. Her eyes had softened then, the tension in her shoulders easing. "I always knew you loved me, Mom," she'd whispered, her voice thick with emotion, even when you didn't know how to show it. That moment, more than any words I had heard or spoken, was the beginning of our healing. My newfound understanding of love, of its boundless and unconditional nature, made my former artistic pursuits feel hollow. I tried to pick up a brush again to replicate the precision of my past work, but it was like trying to force a square peg into a round hole. My hands moved hesitantly, my mind filled with doubt. The desire for perfection had been so deeply ingrained that letting it go felt like a betrayal of my very identity. But then, one afternoon, as I sat staring at a blank canvas, a thought bloomed in my mind, as vibrant and unexpected as a wildflower. What if I just played? I remember the sensation vividly. It was like a dam breaking within me. I reached for the brightest colors I owned, audacious reds, electric blues, sunshine yellows, and began to apply them to the canvas with a freedom I had never known. There was no plan, no preconceived notion of what the finished product should be. I used my fingers, smearing the paint across the surface, letting the colors bleed and merge. I used palette knives, scraping and layering, creating textures that were rough and unpredictable. I even incorporated some gold leaf, not in the delicate, precise patterns of my past, but in bold, sweeping gestures, like bursts of raw energy. It was messy. It was chaotic. And for the first time in a long time, it felt utterly, wonderfully mine. The core message, the one that had been infused into my very being during those precious minutes of absence, continued to guide me. Your daughter's choice to pursue art was her own path, and your constant worry was a misguided form of love. She knows you are proud, even if you never said the words. This understanding became the bedrock of my new existence. I saw how my anxieties had clouded my perception, how my need for control had stifled Sarah's spirit. Her art, which I had once dismissed as frivolous, now represented her authentic voice, her unique way of engaging with the world. And the knowledge that she knew I was proud, even when I had been so terrible at expressing it, was a profound source of comfort and absolution. My old studio, filled with the sharp scent of turpentine and the ghosts of my past perfectionism, became a place I avoided. The smell was a trigger, a harsh reminder of the suffocating expectations I had placed upon myself. My new creative space was a sun-drenched spare room in my house, painted a soft cream, filled with plants and the gentle hum of a music box. It was a space that breathed, that invited spontaneity, that echoed the peace I had experienced in that other realm. The music box melody, so intricate and delicate, became a constant companion. It was more than just sound, it was a feeling, a reminder of the profound sense of knowing that had washed over me. It was the sound of creation, of order, of a love that transcended all boundaries. When I painted now, I often had the music playing softly in the background, allowing its gentle rhythm to guide my strokes. The vibrant emeralds and shimmering golds that had dominated my vision in that other place began to find their way onto my canvases, not as imitations, but as echoes, as expressions of the deep peace and boundless joy I had discovered. I started attending art classes again, not the rigorous, technique-focused workshops I had once favored, but informal gatherings where the emphasis was on exploration and self-expression. I met other artists, a diverse group of individuals who were not afraid to embrace imperfection, to experiment, to find beauty in the unexpected. Their canvases were alive with bold colors and unconventional forms, and I felt a sense of belonging, a kinship that transcended the years of isolation. One of the most significant changes was my renewed relationship with Sarah. We began to see each other regularly, not with the strained obligation of family duty, but with genuine affection and a shared appreciation for the present moment. We talked for hours about her art, about my new creative direction, about the simple joys of everyday life. I no longer felt the urge to offer unsolicited advice or to subtly steer her choices. Instead, I listened. I truly listened, absorbing her words, her passion, her unique perspective. It was a profound shift, a testament to the transformative power of that brief sojourn beyond the veil. The weight of my past was gradually lifting. The boxes of old sign painting supplies sat in the garage, untouched. I had no desire to revisit that chapter of my life. Those tools, once so precious, now felt like relics of a bygone era. symbols of a self that had been too tightly bound by rigid expectations. I had learned to appreciate the beauty of gold leaf, not as a mark of perfection, but as another vibrant hue in the palette of life. My faith, too, had undergone a metamorphosis. The rigid doctrines I had once clung to, with their emphasis on judgment and punishment, no longer resonated. I had experienced a love that was absolute, a forgiveness that was inherent. My belief was now a more fluid, more intuitive understanding of a benevolent force that permeated all things. It was the feeling of being held, of being known, of being inextricably connected to everything. I no longer prayed for intervention, but simply sought to be in communion with that universal presence, to live in accordance with its gentle, guiding rhythm. The memories of the afterlife were not fleeting visions, but a constant, grounding presence. I would often close my eyes and feel that gentle warmth spread through my bones, hear the faint, intricate melody of the music box, and see the impossibly deep emerald and shimmering gold bleeding into each other. It was a sanctuary I could return to, a wellspring of peace and wisdom that sustained me in my earthly existence. The transformation was not always easy. There were moments when the old habits of perfectionism would try to reassert themselves, when a critical thought would surface, questioning the perceived flaws in my work or the choices of those around me. But now, I had the tools to navigate these internal challenges. I could recognize those thoughts for what they were, echoes of an outdated script, and gently release them, returning my attention to the present moment, to the vibrant, imperfect reality that surrounded me. It was like learning to see the strings on a puppet show and choosing not to pull them, allowing the performance to unfold organically. One crisp autumn afternoon, I found myself standing in my old studio, the one with the lingering scent of turpentine. Sarah was with me, her arm resting lightly on my shoulder. We had decided to go through some of my old equipment to sort through what I wanted to keep and what I wanted to donate. As I picked up a delicate sable brush, one I had used for countless hours to create impossibly fine lettering, I felt a pang, not of regret, but of a quiet acknowledgement of a journey completed. "This brush," I said, turning it over in my fingers, "it used to be my lifeblood." Sarah smiled. "And now?" I looked at her, my heart full. "Now," I said, my voice soft, "now, it's just a reminder of how far I've come." I gently placed the brush back in its case. "I think it's time for someone else to find their own kind of perfection with it." We continued sorting, the air thick with a comfortable silence, punctuated by the occasional shared memory or a soft chuckle. It was a quiet testament to our evolving relationship, to the understanding that had blossomed between us in the aftermath of my extraordinary experience. The harsh, sterile environment of the hospital, once a place of terror, was now a distant memory, its power diminished by the vibrant colors and profound peace that had followed. As I looked around the room, at the meticulously organized jars of pigment, the pristine tools, the rolls of gold leaf, I felt a sense of detachment, not of loss. These objects had served a purpose, had been integral to the person I once was. But they no longer defined me. My identity had shifted, expanded, embraced a new definition of beauty, one that celebrated imperfection, spontaneity, and the raw, unfiltered expression of the soul. I remembered the surgeon and the nurse, their faces blurred in my fading consciousness, their presence a part of the medical drama that had accompanied my physical demise. They had been instruments of my transition, their actions leading me to that liminal space between worlds. I held no anger towards them, no resentment for the procedure that had brought me so close to the precipice. They were simply part of the tapestry, threads in the grand design that had led me to this new understanding of life, love, and myself. My days were no longer dictated by the relentless pursuit of flawless execution. Instead, they unfolded with a gentle rhythm, a quiet appreciation for the present moment. I found joy in the simple act of watching sunlight stream through my studio window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I savored the warmth of a mug of tea in my hands, the comforting weight of it a grounding sensation. I listened to Sarah's laughter on the phone, each peal a melody of pure, unadulterated joy. The weight of Tuesdays, once a heavy burden, had completely dissipated. That day, so indelibly marked by the chilling metallic taste and the tightening in my chest, was no longer a harbinger of dread. It was simply another day, another opportunity to explore the vast canvas of existence, to paint with colors that reflected the vibrant hues of my inner landscape. I found myself drawn to nature, to the wild, untamed beauty of the world around me. I would wander through parks, sit by the ocean, and simply absorb the intricate details of leaves, the ebb and flow of the tides, the silent wisdom of ancient trees. It was in these moments, surrounded by the perfect imperfections of the natural world, that I felt most connected to that profound sense of peace I had experienced. My art had become a form of meditation, a way of translating the ineffable into something tangible. My canvases were no longer displays of technical prowess, but vibrant expressions of my inner world. I would lose myself for hours, immersed in the process, letting the colors and textures guide me. There was no pressure, no expectation, only the pure joy of creation. One evening, Sarah came over for dinner. As we were clearing the table, she paused, her eyes fixed on a smudge of vibrant blue paint on the tablecloth. "This blue," she said, her voice soft, "it reminds me of that painting you're working on, the one with all the swirling colors. It feels so alive, Mom." A warmth spread through me, a familiar, comforting sensation that was both grounding and exhilarating. It was the echo of that honey-like light, the gentle caress of a love that was now as real and tangible as the air I breathed. "Thank you, darling," I replied, my voice catching slightly. "It's meant to be." She smiled, a genuine radiant smile that reached her eyes. "It is, and it's beautiful. Really beautiful." That compliment coming from Sarah held a weight and authenticity that no amount of critical acclaim ever could. It wasn't about technical skill or artistic merit, it was about connection, about the shared understanding of a deeply felt emotion. It was about seeing and being seen, about recognizing the beauty in the messy, chaotic, and utterly human act of creation. My old sign painting studio remained, a quiet testament to a past life. I had started boxing up the supplies, the meticulously organized tools, the jars of shimmering gold, leaf. It wasn't a task of mourning, but one of gentle release. I had honored that part of myself, had learned what I needed to learn, and now it was time to let it go, to make space for the new. The scent of turpentine still lingered, but it no longer held the same power. It was like the fading echo of a dream, a reminder of a journey that had led me to this present moment. The sterile smell of antiseptic was gradually losing its grip. It was a constant battle, a reminder of that terrifying moment of transition, but with each passing day, its power diminished. I could walk into a doctor's office now, even the oncology wing, and feel only a mild discomfort, a fleeting memory rather than a visceral terror. The fear had been replaced by a profound gratitude, a deep appreciation for the life that had been returned to me. I looked at my hands, no longer striving for an impossible perfection, but capable of creating beauty in its rawest, most honest form. They were the hands of an artist, yes, but also the hands of a mother who had learned to embrace the beautiful messiness of life. The hands of a woman who had faced death and emerged with a profound understanding of love and acceptance. The final block of text, the core message that had been imprinted upon my soul, continued to resonate. Your daughter's choice to pursue art was her own path, and your constant worry was a misguided form of love. She knows you are proud, even if you never said the words. This was not a singular revelation, but an ongoing lesson, a guiding principle that informed every aspect of my transformed life. I was still learning, still growing, still evolving, but I was doing so with a newfound sense of peace and purpose. Yesterday, I found myself standing in my new studio, the afternoon sun bathing the room in a warm, golden light. Canvases of vibrant colors leaned against the walls, each one a testament to my newfound freedom. The gentle melody of the music box played softly in the background, a familiar lullaby of peace and acceptance. I picked up a brush, not for a sign, not for a commission, but simply for the sheer joy of it. I dipped it into a pot of deep emerald green, the color of my rediscovered peace, and began to paint, my strokes free, bold, and utterly authentic. The light filtering through the window was not the blinding brilliance of a divine revelation, but the gentle, steady glow of a new dawn, promising an endless, exquisite beauty in the glorious imperfection of life.